Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the February edition of Peer-to-Peer Academy. We're going to talk about controversies in refractive surgery tonight. So we're going to talk about asking the tough questions, dealing with the difficult cases, and how to maximize efficiency in refractive surgery while maintaining that elevated level of care. So tonight I'm joined by three of my really good friends, Becky Miller. Becky's out of Fort Worth at Mueller Vision. I'm here with Bobby Saenz. Bobby is at Mission Cataract and LASIK near San Antonio, and then Anu Ondhia at Prism Eye Institute, our friend to the north in Canada. So, guys, thanks for joining us and lending your expertise.
Thanks
So
for having
let's
us.
yeah, let's jump in. So, cataract surgery and refractive surgery, it's evolving very quickly. We've been doing it very similarly for the last few decades, but I think the way we do it and how we handle efficiencies in the office and how we keep that elevated level of care has really, really changed. So, Bobby, let's start with you. So we've got kind of a numbers problem, it seems like. Our graduating residents in ophthalmology, that number seems like it's been pretty stable, but in optometry and our elevating or our aging population, we're going to have a need for cataract surgery, right? I mean, how do we handle that numbers problem moving forward while keeping that elevated level of care?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The one of the surgeons that we brought on recently was actually we were having this conversation, and he was basically saying that, what did he say? He said basically, if you look at the American Academy of Ophthalmology, which normally represents 90-ish% of all, ophthalmologists, if you look at one of the stats there, it was like almost half. It was like more, like 40 something percent of these ophthalmologists in the American Academy of Ophthalmology are over the age of 60. And it's like, okay, that's actually really interesting to just then think about, as we see some of these newer, maybe newer-ish models are becoming more common of optometrists really being involved in refractive and cataract surgery, it becomes interesting just to think about like, what does the future of these kinds of models look like? And are we going to be relying on optometrists more? And I think that if you look at the really successful practices, they find a way to integrate both. And then it becomes an interesting concept of like, okay, if that's the case, and maybe the number of ophthalmology residents isn't increasing, or are we going to rely on optometry more? And then the question is like, how do you get optometry to that level? Because there's really like I remember when refractive surgery talk like in optometry school came up, I was like, why do we need to even learn this? Like I'm not even going to be in refractive surgery. Yeah, it's kind of funny to think about now, but it's just kind of interesting. Is like, okay, so now if you have these really awesome positions that are out there where optometrists and ophthalmologists can work together at a really high level, the question is like, how do you get the training on board to where everybody's on the same page and really everybody can practice at the highest of their level and lead to potentially some efficiencies and providing great customer service and really providing great experiences and outcomes for patients.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so all four of us on the panel here, we all work very involved with ophthalmology, and we all have, a lot of say about what happens in the operating room, even though we're not necessarily the ones holding the instruments. But back in school, I mean, I graduated, short 10 years ago, and we didn't get a whole lot. I mean, the education was great, and I value my education that I got, but surgical stuff, we didn't really touch a whole lot. And now being heavily involved in that collaborative care model where my opinion actually matters, there seems like there's a little bit of a gap there. How do we learn that? And how do we learn on the fly? Now, I've been blessed with mentors, and I think we all have to kind of take us under their wings. But that collaborative model, I think, is really just becoming the norm. Before I forget, I also want to remind everybody who's joining us tonight, this is supposed to be interactive. So if you have questions, comments, I'd love it if you type it in the webinar chat so we can kind of stimulate this discussion. But anyways, I digress. Becky, you guys have an interesting, because you just opened up cold like a year ago, right? Down with
Yeah.
Brett?
Yeah. So Brett and I opened Mueller Vision a year ago last week. So big milestone, which is exciting. And for any of us on the call who've been a part of cold starts, it's an adventure. It's a steep learning curve. And a lot of it is hanging on every day and figuring it out as you go. And we've had a lot of fun along the way. But there really is a huge problem when we look at how many ophthalmologists are coming out. If there's 500 residencies a year, how many of those actually complete residency? Brett and I were talking about that one day, and not everybody who goes into residency completes in their desired field. And so even with that, not everybody's coming out with cataract and refractive experience. So not only do we have a challenge of not enough surgeons, our optometry schools really do not have an opportunity to adequately prepare ODs as they graduate for opportunities. And there's a lack there. And so we've all been fortunate, like Nick said, to be blessed with different mentors. And I've been fortunate to work with surgeons across the country who are incredible and have poured into me, taught me a lot over the years, and still more to learn every single day. But with that, we're trying to create a community, a conversation about how do we navigate some of these complex conversations. So Brett and I work hand in hand. I have the opportunity to see every single one of our patients when they come in for cataract consults or refractive consults, and then help guide them through that experience. And I think a lot of these high volume, high premium practices are looking to shift to those models in the next 5 to 7 years if they haven't already. You know, Nick, when I think about what you and John have created, I mean, you do almost all of the consults. How do you loop John into some of those things?
Well, I think it's a true team. So him and I both have interactions with the patients preoperatively. He definitely values my opinion. You know, if there's something that I think that we could do, or something, maybe sometimes more importantly, something that I think that we shouldn't do, that holds weight, and he takes that into his decision too. And so a lot of these cases, you know, challenging cases especially, where you know I really, it's amazing to me that he values my opinion so much, that he's been doing this for 30 years, and you know, I don't want to age him or anything, but he's been doing this for a couple of years, and you know, he's got tens of thousands of procedures under his belt. So why would he respect my opinion as the OD who has never done a cataract surgery or a LASIK surgery at all? Well, I mean, it's because of the background and the knowledge that I've developed over the years, and obviously optometry school helped with that. You know, the understanding of the visual system and the optics, and then it comes down to interpersonal relationships. I think the really good optometrists that are in refractive practices and are good at it have that ability to relate to their patients. And I think it's that feeling of you know, developing that small, almost, you make the patient feel like you're their friend, right? And you want to make sure that they're along for the entire journey with you. So Becky, I mean, how do you guys do it? I mean, do you see all the consults then? And how do you determine who's going to have what implant? How do you determine who's going to have either LASIK or SMILE or ICL? How do you make those determinations with the two of you?
Yeah, so it's the beauty of having an OD run clinic is even when your surgeon's in the OR, the clinic is still active. So I see 100% of the consults that come in, counsel them on options, leave them with a strong recommendation of what I think is going to give them the best results of what they're looking for. Ultimately, trying to match the patient with the best technology, with realistic expectations. I mean, that's the end game of everything that we do. Try to set realistic expectations. But what that does, it gives the surgeon a lot more autonomy. They can be almost anywhere during the day. And most of the time where they want to be is in the OR. So I'll counsel the patient. If there's something unique or something I have a question on, I can always reach out to my surgeon. He's a text message, phone call away. We take a lot of pictures, send them back and forth for different things that we're curious on. So leaning on technology and those virtual opportunities where we can interact has been really key for us.
Yeah, the beauty of technology in the 21st century. That's great. So Anu, let's bring you in here. Your practice, you work with several surgeons and you're like a tertiary care center. How do you determine, let's say a patient comes in and they want the best of the best. You've got world-class surgeons next to you. They want, ICOM to do this procedure. How do you determine who's not a good candidate for something?
Yeah, so I think Becky hit the nail on the head. It's realistic expectations. Technology is fantastic, but biology still has to come into play. There are limitations, whether that's the patient who has, some pathologies, some kind of guarded prognosis for whatever kind of a reason, and then going with that, going in the same direction, not fighting against it, matching up. It's the art and the science. The science is the optics, of course, which you've alluded to that the optometrists are so beautifully positioned to deal with the optics of things, but it's the the crux of the art of it, the art of refractive surgery, which I mean has really encompassed more than just refractive, which I know we're going to talk about some other elements that come into that. But it's that art that I wish, you guys are a little bit more junior than my, gray self here. But in school, I didn't learn a thing. I don't think surgery was ever mentioned. And I had to learn everything, piece by piece, clawing through. I've had some fantastic mentors. But how wonderful is it that we're now here, the four of us together at different stages of our careers, able to kind of share and kind of guide the next generation too. I just think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So, I mean, if we're working with so many cool technologies, naturally the reimbursement for cataract surgery is going down, at least in the States. I mean, we're getting paid nickels for basic routine surgery now. There's more of a drive for a premium product. And, what we're quote unquote selling to our patients is a lifestyle and it's spectacle independence. How do you provide value? Bobby, why don't we go to you? How do you provide value? How do you illustrate value and teach value without sounding like a used car salesman? I think there's a fine line there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm just kind of chuckling because I just had a patient this last week who was like, needs to come back. And she was like, yeah, telling the front, she's like, please book me 2 hours with the doctor. And I'm like, I was chuckling because like, if you're just billing insurance, that's going to be really hard.
And we just talked about who not to do premium procedures on. Maybe that was one.
That's a
it's like,
that's a red flag.
I tried to see you back in 2 weeks. We'll repeat the scans.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think first of all, I think is if you in these clinics are committed to correcting vision, then you're gonna assume you're gonna do that on everybody. So I think it's first is like, do you actually believe in it? Like, do you believe that, let's take cataracts, for example, that correcting the distance and intermediate vision gives them the ability to like walk without having to wear progressives all the time? Or do you believe that correcting their distance and up close vision will give them, freedom? And I think that if you get people to buy into that, or even correcting astigmatism, I always love asking people, at what point do you correct astigmatism during cataract surgery? And, some people is like, oh, it's 0.75. And it's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So if you had 0.5 diopters in glasses, would you correct that in glasses? Yes. And at surgery, you wouldn't. And it's just kind of interesting questions to think about. It's like, if you have 0.25, like you'll correct in glasses, but not at surgery. There's just interesting questions to think about. But I think that if you really believe in correcting the vision and everybody believes in that, then you can approach cataract evals in a way that you're assuming everybody's going to have their vision corrected. Or when these patients are coming in for refractive surgery, I mean, those people want refractive surgery, so it's a little bit easier to assume they want their vision corrected. But I think that just ultimately at the end of the day, just driving value, talking about what their life is going to be like afterwards with these certain types of procedures makes it really easy for your clinic and of course, seeing the happiness afterwards. I mean, we had a lady who brought the surgeon a Valentine's Day gift. A female patient brought female surgeon Valentine's Day because she's just seeing so great after her first eye. So you get those testimonials and people bringing you stuff or cookies or, just things like that. Makes it really easy just to keep wanting to do that, being able to have the time to spend, an hour, maybe 2 hours, even with one patient, because these patients are willing to invest in their vision.
I had the best gift ever from a patient actually about a month ago after we did her final lock-in with the LAL. She's 2015, super happy, thrilled, and she pulls out, she goes up to the waiting room, she comes back with a 12-pack of beer. We're in Wisconsin. I mean, beer is it's like a love language around here. So I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Thank you so much. I came home and I told her, I got beer for a gift. This is awesome. Normally it's cookies or, something like that. But so let's talk about purely elective procedures. So LASIK, SMILE, ICL. Let's say, so Bobby, when we were at the Evo OD Summit last month or 2 months ago, you gave kind of a story about boiling it down to why somebody may have come in for a consult but not scheduled surgery. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like how you kind of make that, that capture?
Yeah, I think there are, one controversial point here would be like, there's a lot of doctors who are like, I don't want to talk about money. Like, I don't want to talk about objections. Like, we'll let somebody else do that. And I think that as doctors get more and more comfortable with overcoming objections or even talking about price, it leads to overall more patients signing up for surgery. So I think that it's just important to understand that when somebody's coming in it doesn't matter what you're getting them to sign up for. It's really just main two objections that they're going to give you. And it's either going to be cost or fear. And but sometimes they'll give you fake objections like, I want to think about it. I need to talk to my spouse. I got to look at my schedule. There's plenty of these fake objections that are out there. And so I think that when patients come in, I think the more and more you just get comfortable with just being able to figure out like, okay, what's their true objection? Is it money or is it fear? And if it's fear, like, let me tell you about either patient testimonials or let me walk you through the process, or, just trying to figure fear of the product, fear of the unknown, being able to educate them on those things, it's led to more patients signing up for surgery. So I think that it's, number one, not easy to do. Sometimes in your stomach, you have this like feeling of like, oh gosh, I don't really want to ask this question. But number two, it's just like the more you do it, like the easier it gets. Like I imagine like when I was 5 years old, like when they told me to brush my teeth, my parents did, I was probably like, no, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. And then eventually you're just like, meh, you just like get used to brushing your teeth. So I kind of feel like it's like that. It's just like with the more reps you get, the easier it becomes. Because truly, genuinely, like you want people to, sign up for surgery. You see the impact it can make. It can be life-changing. But some people just need a little bit more help along the pathway to get them to sign up.
Yeah, I think, it is fear or it is cost. And cost, I mean, there's natural barriers there that we can definitely provide value, but, everybody's got their own restrictions, their own limitations. Fear is the easy one. I think, especially with the new technologies. I mean, what you gave the example of the Evo, and you can talk about the data all day. You can talk about how safe it is. You can talk about the visual outcomes. And, those are all published and they're all very real. With the light adjustable lens, how long it takes. It's always something that I get kind of, well, that takes a long time. Well, the length of time is the fun part because you get to test drive your vision.
Yeah.
Becky, how do you do it in your practice when you're met with that resistance?
What's so interesting? So in a cold start, you get to do a little bit of everything, whether you're interested in doing it or not. And so kind of like you, Bobby, it's like, okay, let's get in the reps. And so a lot of times I get the opportunity to counsel patients, and that includes talking about finances. And that had been something that had been intimidating for a long time. Like we had an amazing counseling team. So I didn't have to talk about money. And I'm like, you know what, this is going to be a really cool opportunity. And I found that I can connect with patients on a new level, and I can instantly address any objections that they have and help them overcome it. They can answer their questions and they can come up with a solution they're going to be happy with probably within 3 to 5 minutes. And I think that having your doctor open some of those conversations makes the flow of the rest of the experience a lot faster. And I've noticed that patients get to their yes, whatever that is, so much faster. And so I'm a big advocate for doctors who are comfortable talking about money going there. We use a lot of different financing options for patients. So we always offer financing. We're quick to follow that up. So here's the price of the light adjustable lens. Here's the results. Here's my expectations. Here's the average cost for that. Most of our patients choose to finance surgery. We've got a couple different companies that we work with who can help with that. Let me get you some information before you go. And instantly like, oh, I don't need any financing. I'm ready to pay cash. Okay, great. So cost was not an objection for them. And then you can kind of, again, is it fear? We start every surgery with a nice anesthesia experience. You're comfortable, relaxed. So you can instantly address some of those questions in their mind. And I found that flow to be a lot more productive in our cold start. And every practice has a different system that they work within.
And you and Brad, I mean, your verbal anesthesia is also, I'm sure, very, very good. And that helps. And that's something that they definitely don't teach you in school. I mean, that is an art. And that's something that is learned on the job and learned on the fly. And some people have it, some people don't. Anu, what about you? In a larger practice, how do you deal with the resistance?
So I think the money question is the big $1 million question. It's the elephant in the room. I 100% agree. It's one of those things like you, Becky. I was really intimidated, in the beginning, and more I just don't want to deal with it. I've got 1,000,001 things to go over with you. Why am I going to waste my time with it? And of course, I discovered over time that really wasn't the right place, the right mindset to have, with these patients. And I think bringing up, anything kind of scary, anything that could be kind of a pain point in the doctor's lane will be seen completely differently. I could say the same thing as my clinical counselor, but they're going to hear it in a completely different way, in a different light, and they'll respond to that differently. So I think certainly opening that door is key. Having financing options is fantastic. Some of the other things we've used are, just weighing up the cost. So things like our EVO ICL patients, or our LASIK patients, or our PRK patients. patients, for example, they're young, they're savvy. They can think about, how much will a lifetime of glasses cost you, plus your contacts, plus your backup glasses, your prescription sunglasses, all those different things, and kind of weigh it up for them. And so it's not, a big moment of sticker shock. It's that they've got time to sit with it. You're not really kind of giving an opinion. You're just kind of providing them with some facts and letting them digest it. And then they do get to that yes, a lot quicker.
One thing I like is the peas or carrots, method of talking with patients. And there's even this guy, like this really successful shoe salesman in New York. And like they asked him, like, what makes you so successful? And he was like, when people are picking out shoes, I only let them pick two. If somebody wants to pick a third one, I'm coming back to two. And I like that because even if you think about like LASIK and ICL, and I think about a patient I saw today, and I'm like, if LASIK, I'm just going to make up some numbers here. Like, let's say LASIK's $5,000 and ICL $7,500. Together we have to decide is ICL worth $2,500? And then you get to kind of see like, it's like we're on the same team. We have to decide together. And it's not like this like sales resistance. It's more like we're just trying to figure this stuff out together. And it's interesting because you'll get responses like $2,500. It's your eyes. Like, it seems like we should do the ICL. And it's like, great, let's do that. And it's just amazing how many more people you get to sign up for ICL just doing that. Or, the difference between, a toric monofocal and light adjustable lens is this. And so we have to decide, is it worth an extra, $3,000 or $4,000? And we have to decide that together. It's interesting to see people's responses. And it's more of like, we're trying to figure this out together rather than it's like, oh, you're dropping me off with the sell. Oh, here's the sales guy. And it just creates this like negative juju.
It's a great trust, like the trust relationship there completely shifts the dynamic. 100% agree.
It's so funny. So in our clinic, we have this beautiful like glass walls everywhere, and we have this really cool room. It's got a great view, and it's all glass. And I was taking a patient back, and the husband, I could hear him like whisper to the wife, "Oh yeah, that's the money room. They're going to take us in there to tell us about all the money." And so I kind of disarmed him in the room, and I was like, "Okay, well, let's answer some of the financial questions and come up with some solutions that make sense for you and what you're looking for." And the husband was like, "Man, you really surprised me. So we're not going to go to the glass room and talk about money." I was like, "No, we just go over paperwork in there." And he's like, "Oh, this is kind of cool." So that price transparency, like you said, Anu, it creates a different level of trust and a connection. And Bobby, like you said, you're on the same team. It's a decision that they're making alongside you and what's best for them. And the finances are a part of it.
But it's interesting. I mean, that is one controversy. Just get patients to sign up for surgery in the room, right? Instead of actually going to the scheduling room, because it's kind of like, oh, we're just in the exam room. We're just scheduling surgery. It's kind of, controversy would be like, I need my exam lane, but it'd be interesting. Just try that out. I mean, we have some really high level people on this call. It's like, try that out, see what happens. And look, what happens to your conversion rate doing it in the exam room versus going to like the sales room.
Well, I feel like you do have like the emotional buy-in. Like I know, by the time I've kind of sent my patient over to the counselor, they're pretty bought in, and it's really just kind of dotting those, I's and crossing those T's at that point. So, yeah, I guess it's just a step further than that. It's really not that far of a stretch.
I kind of like so Bobby, is that how you do it? You schedule surgery in the exam room most of the time?
Yeah. Just like what day? Okay. Yeah. Great. Yeah. It's going to be this much. Great. Awesome. Beautiful. Let's go.
That's great. Because I don't think we have the ability to do that right now, the way our workflow is, but I don't like taking the patient to the money room because that gives you the feeling of buying a car. We've all bought cars. We've all spent way too long in a dealership. And then you've got that guy who comes in looking all slick, and then he pulls up, well, let me go talk to my manager, right? And then it's negative. Buying a car should be fun, right? You're buying something new. It's a big purchase. It shouldn't be negative. And I don't want patients to feel like that. Just like your patient, like your anecdote, Becky. That's perfect. So the way we do it, we don't do it in the exam room necessarily as much as we'd like to. We usually do a phone call after. I tell patients that when I see them, like, we'll call you usually about 48 hours. We're going to give you 48 hours to digest this because there's so much stuff thrown at them. Number one, you're cutting into my eyeballs. What? That's crazy. Number two, I'm going to have to pay $5,000-$10,000 for this. That's also crazy. I didn't know about that. I thought I was getting cataract surgery like my grandma did 50 years ago. And, bada bing, bada boom, you're out in a couple days. They have no idea what's coming. So I like to give them a couple days to digest it, and then not too much, because there's also a lot of negative stuff that they can research. So I don't want to give them a whole week because they can fall into some serious traps and talk to too many people. So 24 to 48 hours is kind of that sweet spot for us. So let's talk about I mean, that's the elephant in the room. That is really, the cost. Price transparency, I think, is important. Bobby, where do you list prices? Do you give patients prices before they come in? How do you do with that?
Yeah, for me, I just try to look at like what other people do. And I think that the people who do really, really, really well in maybe just not necessarily our industry, but other industries, what they try to do is they bring people in, like you go and you're like looking for pricing and you can't see any pricing. And that's because they try to add value first. If you list your prices online, there's plenty of companies who do that and plenty of companies who are successful. But in my mind, it's like, I would rather have the patient come in. I would rather list the benefits, the true benefits, not like the TikTok benefits or whatever they're researching. It's like, let me tell you about the specific benefits that address your pain points, like the reason why you even came in. And then we can tell you the price. And then we can see if there's enough value there for you to sign up for surgery. Because I think if you just have the prices online, people will be like, oh, they're not really sure of all the benefits, and most of the time aren't even aware of some of the benefits that would actually be true to them.
I think that's the value of not just the procedure or the technology, but the value of you, of your experience and your expertise, and kind of bringing that to the patient as an individual, personalized, recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like buying a expensive bottle of wine at a restaurant. I don't know anything about wine. I can tell you that I'm not going to pick the most expensive one if I don't know anything about it. Coming in and letting somebody tell me about it so I can educate myself, I think is important. And I think you made a really good point about selling yourself. And it's not just the technology. The technology is great, but part of it is the surgeon, part of it is the entire team. And that is a part of the value. Is the technology going to work, but is it going to be done correctly and handled appropriately? Becky, what about you? What do you think about like price transparency? Do you have it on your website? Do you give it to patients before?
It's an interesting question. So I would say we're very transparent with price, but we don't have it publicly listed. A big part of surgery is not just the number. Surgery is not a commodity. And I think that's really important. We've all hit on it. Surgery is a lot more than the results. It's an experience. And so being able to be with a team that you trust, you build some rapport with, because at the end of the day, surgeons, doctors, their success is not based on how many great cases they did. Their success is based on how did you handle the rocky roads? And that's what patients are going to remember. So we're transparent with pricing in front of our patients. So they all leave with the cost of what we expect their surgery to be and an estimate from the insurance company, but it's not posted publicly. We try to update those prices just to keep in line, I would say, with the market. And it's shifting. We're all seeing that with the cost going up, and patients understand that, and patients expect that price to shift every year. We're considering price changes right now, and we've had patients who saw us at the end of last year like, well, the price is going up. And so that's another difficult conversation to navigate. And that just happens to go with the economy. But every time we're upfront and transparent with the patients on here's what the price is, here's why we do it that way, here's the value it adds. Ultimately, end of the day, every single thing we do is value driven for the patient and what they need and what their expectations are with the outcome. And once they hear all of those things, price ends up being a number and not a major concern.
So part of the thing you mentioned about the care, so in the process with premium lenses, I guess with co-management, how do you address that with the price? How is that included in your guys' practice?
Yeah, so everybody adds value. So you've got a doctor, they sent you over here. They're very experienced, knowledgeable with post-op care. You don't have to come here for every single post-op visit, although we're involved. So I communicate with them every step of the way so that they know how you're doing throughout the surgical experience. They're going to see you back for the routine, whatever intervals they want to see you at, and they'll communicate back to me. If there's anything you need at any point, they'll reach out to me or you reach out to me. We'll make sure that we get you back in here right away. So we let the patients know that their doctor can participate in the postoperative care if they would like that, and their doctor agrees as well, and that there's a fee associated with that. They would either pay that fee to the surgeon's office or their referring doctor, and let the patient decide. Each doctor sets their own post-op fees, so we keep a list of that. That way we know what each doctor's fees are unique to the patient, and then we modify the patient charges based on that.
What about you, Bobby? Do you do a lot of co-managing?
Yeah, I would say like 99% of our surgeries are co-managed. So I'd say just ditto what Becky said. I mean, I think the biggest thing right now with everything that's going on is you just want to make sure that you're able to assess what fair market value is for the postoperative care and that everything is clear with the patient. So just say that's the biggest thing, is just making sure it's fair market value. And if you have any questions on that, happy to help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, go ahead,
that brings up an interesting point. So we use a process called CoFi. Anu, do you guys have that in Canada?
Don't. I've heard a little bit about it. It sounds like a really interesting concept. How does it work?
So I was actually on a call with the doctor earlier today, and she sent over a patient for Evo, huge success. He was really happy. And this was before she signed up on CoFi. And so we have this pain point where now the patient is going back to see her. He signed co-management consents and agreed to pay her for postoperative care that she would collect in the office, again, before she was on the CoFi system. And she calls me, she's like, "Okay, we never got a payment." And I was like, "Don't worry, we'll take care of it. Let me get on the phone with the patient." Called him up. He was like, "Oh, yeah. I totally remember that." And so she called him, paid the money, all that stuff. And I was like, "Listen, now that you're on this payment platform, when the patient pays in our office, they will divide that fee. They'll pay you your fee. The patient signs a consent. The patient knows where that money is going, and then they pay our office our fee." And so it's fee transparency, completely HIPAA legal, above board, all those important things. And there's a couple great systems out there that you can look into. This is the one that we're using right now. We've been pretty happy with it. They've got a great team that will reach out. So whenever we have a new doctor on board, their representative will reach out and help answer any questions the doctor has. They're essentially kind of like a credit card processing, if you think of that. So there's a fee associated with their work, which I think is well worth it. Most of the doctors we work with absolutely agree. But those are questions that doctors have when they onboard into a new system of, okay, how do they make money? I said, well, here's how it works. You can ask them specific questions about how they run their business. And they've been really, really happy with it.
I think that's really cool. It makes it super efficient. I mean, for us, we don't set we don't let doctors set their own kind of co-management fee. So it comes out of the surgical fee, and then is kind of sent out, through the company. So, but that would be a really cool platform to be able to make use of that. I think the biggest thing is teamwork. So whether it's teamwork between the surgeon and ourselves in the practice, whether it's the staff members or those external ODs, for us, it's an open door policy, open inbox policy. We have referring ODs come in all the time to come and shadow not just surgery, because I mean, you've seen a few, you've seen them all, right? They really want to come and hang out in the lane. I'm sure you guys have done the same, that kind of mentoring that's really just, it's priceless. They can come in, they feel comfortable, and then they don't feel that they're losing a patient. They just feel, empowered to be able to help them. And it builds referrals, it builds the practice, and that's how we've done it. Obviously there's kind of dinners and webinars, hopefully platforms like this that can kind of, be of use to some of these folks as well. But
I think having ambassador lenses too. So STAR has an ambassador program, our Excite, we've done ambassador programs for. But if you're fortunate enough to have a doctor who's interested in having surgery with you, that is absolutely priceless, right? So I just had an OD, younger guy our age, and he's gonna have Evo. And he's like right on the border. He's like, -5-ish. Like you could definitely do LASIK pretty comfortably. His cornea is healthy. And I talked to him about Evo, and he really didn't know much about Evo. And I guess that's my fault. I need to do a better job of educating our referring docs. I'm like, hey man, like Evo's great. Like your anterior chamber depth's huge. He's basically spherical. And so like, let's do Evo. Let's do it. And it's going to be, very efficient for you price wise because there's ambassador programs. But while he was there, we did a wet refraction like I normally would. And, you're there for an hour and a half or so with everything that goes into it. But I was able to have him shadow me for some light adjustments too. And so that was the first time he saw that. And then he saw, again, you're selling yourself. So he saw me interact with the patients and present options and, pros and cons with certain scenarios. And he's like, holy cow, man, like, this is great. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome that you're here. This is wonderful. So let's kind of shift. Let's shift gears towards the post-op. So, or I guess keep it pre-op. Considering our premium lenses that we have, so they're all, the new ones especially are fantastic. Our Odyssey, our Envy, our Vivides. Nothing is free in optics, right? There's no such thing as a free lunch. There will always be some compromise. How do you handle, so Bobby, let's start with you. How do you handle those conversations with the expectation issue?
I try to just break it down and just say, historically we've had let's cataract surgery, we've had a monofocal lens, and I'll group toric monofocal there. And then we had more of these like multifocals were bifocals where you get distance and up close. And now you get, okay, extended depth of focus has come out. Then you have like, there's this even middle category between monofocal and extended depth of focus, which I like to call enhanced monofocal. And really, as a patient now, it's like, okay, I could pick from a monofocal, an enhanced monofocal, an extended depth of focus lens, or a trifocal lens. Oh my goodness. How do
Oh,
you,
and LAL too. Yeah.
right. And now, I would put that in one of these categories, but the question is which one of these categories it goes in. But, I think it really becomes interesting. I just try to simplify it and say, look, there's lenses that correct one vision zone. There's lenses that correct two vision zones, distance, intermediate. And then there are lenses that correct distance, intermediate, and up close. And that would be the trifocal. But I think the biggest thing is just it's how do you handle those difficult patients? So let's take, for example, an emmetrope patient, and let's take somebody who's like a -4 myope. One thing I just try to tell them is like, okay, let's just set the foundation of where you are. So let's take, for example, a -4 myope. Mrs. Jones, you're a -4 myope, so you have the world's most perfect near vision, which means, one of the things that's really important for us is as we go into cataract surgery, you'll hear people, yeah, I got a lens that corrected my far vision. And they're like, yeah, that's what I want. I have good near vision. I just want far vision. And so I try to tell them like, no, Ms. Jones, if we correct your distance vision, I would be very scared to see you after surgery. And the reason for that is if we correct your distance vision, your near vision would be, and I kind of pause and I say, well, actually, just one second. Without your glasses, how is your distance vision? And then they use a word, right? Like probably the last patient I saw was like crap. And I'm like, okay, what's really interesting, if we correct your distance vision, your near vision would then be, and I use the same word, whatever word they use, I use crap. And they're like, and it's like, all right, here we go. That's been my best way of just, because before I'd tell people, oh, you can't see up close, and they wouldn't believe me. But like, here we go. Now we start to see them. Okay, so great, Mrs. Jones. So if we use something, for example, like, a trifocal lens, which corrects your distance, intermediate, and up close vision, your near vision, let's say you have 100%, your near vision would go to, and then I just make up a number, like 79% of your near vision. And they're like, and you get to see like, if people are like, oh yeah, that's fine. Can I wear glasses on top? Yeah, sure. Great. Awesome. You get a chance to kind of see who these patients are. Like me, I'm like, with my vision, I'm like totally cool. Like, you know what? Even if I had dry eye and macular degeneration a little bit, and I'm 20/30 at distance, intermediate, up close, great. I'm cool with that. I could probably golf. I'm not good, but I could at least, see where I'm driving. I don't hit the ball that far anyways, but everybody's different, right? You have other people who are like, I need to be able to see craters on the moon. All right, you're going light adjustable lens, no doubt about that. That's what we're doing. So I think that being able to give analogies and even using words that are is helpful for the patient's own words in describing how the vision is going to be, that's been really helpful for me in just trying to get an idea of, again, simplifying the options, kind of seeing which one they're interested in, and then really diving into like, this is how you're going to see afterwards. Is everybody going to be okay with that? Let's talk through the limitations of each of these options, whether that's light adjustable lens, whether that's, I'm going to call them trifocal-like lenses now, now that we have Odyssey and Envy, versus just Panoptics, it creates more options for these patients.
Yeah, comment on that. We just got a comment on here that somebody said that they're really hesitant to recommend multifocal lenses because the results are variable, patients ages, their cornea changes, becomes dry AMD changes, and they start to go downhill. Bobby, how would you address that with the current generation of multifocal or EDOF lenses?
I think it just at the end of the day, it's dependent on the patient. So like, okay, let's take a patient who, okay, so what, we're going to put in a lens that only corrects the distance vision, which is totally fine. But then that patient's going to have to wear progressive. Like my dad fell off of a ladder wearing a progressive. And so for him, like hurt his shoulder pretty bad. That's why he decided to do trifocal. And he's like a retired police officer. And we didn't let him get surgery in the beginning because he wanted to see craters on the moon. He had too high of expectations, right? So it was like, no, you can't have surgery. So I think it's all about setting the right expectation. And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay, right? Until they get the right expectations, then they're allowed to come back and see us. And so I think that, ultimately, yes, there are changes that happen over time. Hey, but check out Also, by the way, in October, when was it? October or November, now FDA approved is a light therapy for macular degeneration. And I think in Canada, you guys have had this longer and some different versions. But I think that's going to be really great for us. Like as optometrists, potentially having some light treatment to help in these macular degeneration patients. I think that's really encouraging. So I think overall, going back to the question, like it's possible. And really, at the end of the day, it's all about expectations, right? What is it? Happiness equals results minus expectations. Like we know the results that we're going to get from these patients. Like you look at the DFU, you look at the FDA clinical data, you look at the clinical trials that's coming out. So now it's really just like how well can you set expectations for now and also for the future.
So Anu, let's come to you because you're a very tertiary care setting, and let's assume that I really stupidly put a multifocal in somebody who should not have had it. What do you do? How do you deal with that patient? And when do you bring your surgeon back in as the optometrist seeing that patient?
Welcome to my world. It's like you live in my head. So we definitely get a lot of patients, mostly from other centers, although, occasionally, we may fall in prey to some of that. But yeah, I mean, the first thing to note is it's not always the lens. I think I don't know who actually just commented, but they said, exactly what he said about multifocals. And most optometrists, you'll ask a room full of 200 optometrists, most will say, "Ooh, I don't know about those multifocal IOLs." And that's kind of just been the prevailing kind of thing out there. It's one of those like myths that just won't die. We all kind of live and breathe this stuff, and we've seen that the outcomes have changed over time. The technology's improved, and not just the technology, not just the expectations, but also picking the right patients. And that means, not just pathology, not just, dioptric power and astigmatism, topography, things like that, ocular surface, but also patients' occupation, patients' personalities. We definitely kind of do a deep dive on all of that. And so sometimes these kind of multifocal intolerant patients, they can be straightforward, glare, halos, and starbursts, where you kind of think, well, that's because of the diffractive technology, where, the reality is you're putting an artificial lens in somebody's eye, and 1% of those will eventually, not tolerate them very well. And that's okay. That can happen actually, funny enough, with monofocals, because we do remove those as well. So I guess the key point there is it's not always the lens. Sometimes it's something that's happened with the patient. I shared with you guys the other day, we had a patient referred for a supposed multifocal intolerance, and in fact, the patient had an NAION. We've had patients with, barn door glaucoma come in, and it's just, it's not always the lens. It could be the macula, could be something else with the eye. If it's our own patients, talking about tolerance, there's some amount of neuroadaptation, which of course can happen, between 3 and 6 months, I think is probably accepted. I think for most of you guys probably agree with that. But having said that, if a patient's no better at month 3 than they were at day 1, it's very unlikely they're going to continue to adapt. And one of the things that we've sort of changed our practice modality is towards kind of earlier intervention with some of these. It's about doing a little bit of hand holding and letting the patient know that you're there for them. You've got their back, you've got solutions that are there, at the right time, the right solution at the right time. And so, removing a lens isn't always the end of the world. I realize that I'm in a privileged position, in our practice, we're able to do this, quite easily. But once everything else has been done, I don't think that's necessarily like a failure. I think it's kind of just a different way to look at that.
We just got a comment, and actually I want to address this. So somebody said that they saw a patient who received LALs and had 32 RK incisions. Yikes, that's a lot. And the comment was wouldn't have recommended that. I guess I would maybe argue that a little bit. An LAL is at the end of the day a monofocal lens. So what else would you put in the 32 RK patient? I don't think I wouldn't put a multifocal in there, right? But an LAL is something that at least gives you a fighting shot, because that cornea is going to work. Yeah, because it's gonna adjust. At least give you a fighting shot. So I don't know if an LAL is a bad choice at all for that patient. 32 RK incisions, that's the bad choice. Yeah, that's a lot.
There are a lot of RK patients out there. Do you guys still notice that? Like, I keep thinking we're all done with them, and they keep coming.
They keep coming. There must have been somebody locally here in Wisconsin that did a lot of it for a long time. I don't know. Yeah. Let's talk about more. So speaking of eyes that have issues, glaucoma is something that we all see every day. And, I think taboo is in somebody who's got glaucoma, you wouldn't put a panoptic, you wouldn't put an MV or a 50. Let's get comment here, Bobby. What does your son have to say? No, I want to come to you.
Do you want to say anything? Yeah. No. Okay. All right.
Poor guy. Put him on the spot.
So Anu, let's go back to you with your heavy glaucoma background and working with Ike and everything. We have the ability to treat three birds with one stone: cataract, spectacle dependent, and glaucoma with all the MIGS procedures that we have. In the MIGS world, let's focus on that. Is there something that you're really excited about? Kind of where is the trends going there?
So I think the whole world of glaucoma is sort of kind of merging. It's like intersecting with refractive surgery, and I feel like it's an opportunity. I feel like, so kind of going back to refractive surgery, if you were to put in a non-toric lens in someone who needed astigmatism correction, you'd really be leaving something on the table. And I feel like the same is true for glaucoma patients. We often have patients who are there for their cataracts, so not because their glaucoma is uncontrolled, but we will do a MIGS procedure. So things like an eye stent, like a hydrus, things like a goniotomy, a GAT, angle-based procedures that don't necessarily add a ton of time or risk to the procedure, but are able to stabilize that glaucoma, and sometimes get patients off of their drops or reduce their drop load, so that in future, if they were to need that filtering surgery, their conjunctiva is in a better spot. We're not worrying about compliance, about side effects, things like that. And patients really love that. I feel like it's kind of interventional glaucoma has really just been the key to everything that we do. Obviously, our practice is a little bit skewed and we wear kind of many hats, but, starting with that, but even, starting with lasers, we do a lot of lasers instead of having patients on drops, but, MIGS combined with surgery, combined with refractive cataract surgery. So, we all know that glaucoma reduces contrast. And so traditionally, I would agree most glaucoma patients probably wouldn't be well suited to a full range of vision like a PanOptix, a Synergy, an Odyssey, an Envy. But, things like extended range lenses. So those non-diffractive options we have nowadays, we actually have the Pure C lens here in Canada. We've had, great successes with it so far. We haven't had it that long yet, but we're doing really well. The Vivity, of course, has been a heavy hitter in our practice for quite a while. And we'll combine that with those MIGS procedures. Now, it's not appropriate for everyone. It doesn't go in every single eye. If someone has, a completely black field and a cupped out nerve, well, that's not really appropriate. But those patients that are, a little bit older, perhaps, and things are really nice and stable, we have the benefit that we've monitored them for years. They do fantastic. You can stabilize things and give them that range of vision. So I think gone are the days where glaucoma kind of ruled out any refractive options. How do you guys kind of deal with that?
And Becky, what about you?
Yeah, I would say much the same. We don't want to leave options on the table for patients if we have the opportunity to address elevated IOP at the time of surgery, or even its control with an eye drop. We just see so much ocular disease. I mean, I feel like 100% of the glaucoma patients I see, I was on the phone with a friend 2 days ago, and she's like, my dry eye practice is thriving. So what are you doing? She said, well, I just went to the glaucoma practice in town. And the glaucoma doctors they just can't deal with dry eye. I don't know if you would agree. There's just so much ocular surface disease when it comes to glaucoma drops. And it's a challenge. So if we can do a combined procedure, the benefit and the value for that patient is enormous in the short term and the long term. One of the comments was just about ocular surface and how the cornea changes with age. We can anticipate those things. So being able to have that opportunity, I think, is key. In thinking about connecting with patients, we kind of hit on this a little bit earlier. Giving the patients the options, helping the patients understand expectations. One of the things that I've always challenged other surgeons to do, and one thing that I've always done in my practices, is whenever we do continuing education courses or education for ODs specifically, we talk about outcomes. We put them out there. We like to be transparent with outcomes. And it helps referring doctors understand, hey, you can trust us. We hold ourselves accountable. So I'll have slides on almost every type of implant we've done over the past year so that we can look at those. But it's important, I think, internally too, for me as the OD and my surgeon who might not be seeing all the post-op care, to understand what are the outcomes. Are we going more myopic, more hyperopic? How much is a spherical equivalent with this certain implant? So we can pivot. That question about would I put a trifocal in this or a light adjustable, it's interesting to think about. And when you look at the outcomes, it helps make data-based decisions instead of, we were on a call a night ago and we were all talking about, just some of these really complicated patients who are just frustrated and upset with whatever it is. And it's easy to make emotional decisions like, oh, I don't want to work with this technology for whatever reason. make data-driven decisions. And so I would say in our practice specifically, we love to combine procedures. We love to give the data on IOP reduction and then the data on what our spherical equivalents are with these technologies and the range of uncorrected vision that we're seeing. And I've noticed referring doctors like that data. A lot of doctors are data-driven.
I think it's really interesting to also note that it's not just like, I think ocular surface gets the bulk of things with good reason. I mean, glaucoma drops are horrendous for the surface of the eye. I often say to my colleagues, I'm sorry, in our practice, we create a lot of these problems, but hey, you have some, ongoing business. So, the ocular surface is a thing, but I mean, a controlled pressure of 15 on 3 meds is very different than a pressure of 15 with a drug eluting implant. So something like a Durista or an iDose, which I know you guys have. We don't have it approved, but we have used it with good success. Or with a MIGS, which of course gained its fame right here with the boss here in Toronto. So those procedures, that pressure, a pressure of just one number, we think about that, and that of course doesn't tell the full story. We have the diurnal variations and things, but it's that fluctuation and those few missed drops, or people are human, they're going to forget their drops, even if we're the most compliant patients ever. Things happen, back orders happen. We're currently fighting some of that with our preservative-free drops here. And so I just think there's benefits beyond just the ocular surface with those glaucoma procedures.
Yeah, I think that one thing that's interesting, it's not so easy. So like sometimes you'll see a cataract eval, they got a good looking cataract, and then you look at the nerve and you're like, they might have glaucoma. And then if we go back to the beginning, we're like, okay, we want to correct the vision. And then the question is like, well, do we correct the glaucoma at the same time? Or like, do we just correct the vision and then we'll come back afterwards and see, do they have glaucoma? And like, are we going to be able to get an OCT and like a visual field through that? That's one thing that I saw in my residency. I did that at Eye Center of Texas in Houston. And it was like, I felt like 50% of our cataract evals that we were getting had some kind of glaucoma component tied to them. And so then I think that me just being how nerdy I am and doing a deep dive on like these patients come in and like they want their vision corrected too. And so the question is like, well, how do you do that? I mean, we have a patient who was referred in last week for SLT. And when I was doing gonio, I'm like, they had PAS, they had a narrow angle. I'm like, okay, actually, this is a chronic angle closure patient, not open angle. And so we talked about they had some cataracts, we're taking out their cataract. And it's really interesting on these patients. It's like, okay, well, I want to correct my vision too. And I want to have the best chance at correcting my distance and near vision. And I want to minimize the chance of wearing my glasses. And they had like 0.75 SIL against the rule. And it's actually one of the questions that just came in, Nick. So it's like, you could use, I mean, let's say the patient doesn't have glaucoma, even they do have glaucoma, and we're going to do, hopefully cataract surgery, and then the angle will open up enough to do MIGS. But like, Nick, in that patient, I mean, are you doing LAL all day long, or are you doing one of these enhanced monofocals or an extended depth of focus and blending them? Or are you like, they've never had a history of blended vision or monovision? Like, how do you approach that?
Well, I mean, the LAL is huge for our practice. I would definitely do that all day. And if cost were neutral, and I tell patients all the time, if the cost weren't a part of this or the costs were the same, we would do LAL, because you take away the variability of the healing process and you can treat and customize. And if you want to try, I get that question all the time, right? I had monovision in my contacts. I hated it, couldn't stand it. Well, the lens, although it's not a depth of focus lens, it's a little bit aspheric. So it does have a little bit of optical overlap. And so you can get away with just a touch of an offset where it's very comfortable. You don't have the anisometropia problems. You don't have the depth perception problems. And if you end up being really sensitive to that, you can undo it. So I mean, the LAL would be the way that I would go in those cases. But I mean, combining it with glaucoma procedures is super, super easy. And the beauty of the LAL now, patients are always a little hesitant up front because of the time that it takes, but that's not a bad thing, because it's the test drive time and they quickly realize that, actually having the time is nice. For me, if I'm managing glaucoma, it also gives me a chance to really capture data on their pressures. And if they've got more severe glaucoma and pressure where we need to have it low and we need to have it stable, and we're really looking at diurnal variations, it's nice to see that patient once a week because it's kind of built into that. So I definitely do not hesitate with LAL for glaucoma patients.
Nick, I used to think that the correct Oh, go ahead, Neil.
I was going to say, you mentioned that diurnal pressure. So one of the things we've actually used in our practice for kind of a number of different things, but we've kind of done studies pre and post surgery and kind of a number of different things. But we've used an eye care home tonometer. So our technicians use them, and so patients are familiar with the device. We train them how to use it. So some of our kind of applications for that would be a glaucoma patient, for example, with a pressure of 10. Every time they come in the office, a pressure of 10, but they're progressing. Their fields are getting worse. This is something we've had really good success with. You mentioned bringing patients back into the practice. Would that be something that might be useful in your practice?
It would, for sure it would. We don't have that here. I mean, but with the LAL, they're just kind of, it's part of the process. They're coming back in. So if it is something that if I can take advantage of them coming in several times, I try to stagger their visits. Now, usually with the LAL, there's appeal to having them coming in at the same time, just if there's cornea instability. But if it's a perfect cornea, we're not really worried about that. It's not an RK patient or something like that. I'll bring them in at different times throughout the day to get an idea of where their pressure is, if I'm concerned about it. And that's an advantage. I mean, that's a strategy. Plus, we have the ability to do, serial fields. Like we use the Radius quite a bit, the headset, which is a quicker one. I mean, it's a quicker field. It's definitely easier, more comfortable for patients to do. So a lot of times we'll just run a real quick. It takes 2 or 3 minutes.
It's much more ergonomic for patients. Like I find patients with like scoliosis or like neck issues,
Mm-hmm.
they can just sit more comfortably. We've had a good response from that.
Yeah, and we do that all the time. I mean, sometimes if they're here for an adjustment visit, they're partially dilated. So there is that in those instances, but we'll do it quick, right? When I put the drops in, just to get an idea if we haven't had one in a while. Or if there's something that I'm really concerned about, we'll just kind of add it on to that visit. And it does not take that long. You don't have to take the patient to a different room. You can do it right there in the exam chair, and it's great. How do you guys manage? I mean, Bobby, do you manage glaucoma quite a bit? Or what happens? I guess a tricky question is somebody's referred to you and it's clear that they have glaucoma, but maybe they weren't told before. That's a sticky situation.
I mean, it's always like, if you find something that wasn't referred to you, usually I just blame it on a test. Yeah, we do this one scan that I bring all the way over here. And this one scan, looking at the note, I'm looking at it and it looks like this. So I'm gonna call your doctor. We're gonna go over it, but right now it looks like that. So there is a high likelihood that we're gonna just go ahead and lower the pressure at the same time, just because we have this one additional scan that gave us this one additional finding. So we're gonna just go ahead and do this one additional treatment. That's generally how I go about doing it. But yeah, I feel like if they have glaucoma, for me, it's like a no-brainer. I mean, I think it was like in 2017, we presented the iStent inject data at American Academy of Ophthalmology, and like somewhere between 84 and 88% of those patients were medication free at 24 months. And it was like that was like my first like aha moment. Like, wow, okay. Like, man, if I didn't have to brush my teeth twice a day, or, if I didn't have to put eye drops in twice a day, I would sign up for whatever surgery, eye surgery or teeth surgery that I'm just like not having one less thing in my life.
Yeah, eye doctors and dentists are always like butting heads, right? We got one on them for sure. That's a great point. I mean, the iStent is great. That's what we use most often, especially in our more moderate to mild cases. It does give you bang for the buck, and again, I can't speak as a surgeon. I've never done it, but it is fairly straightforward. Anu, what do you think within the glaucoma world? I mean, what do your surgeons say about iStent versus other procedures from the technical side?
Yeah, so an iStent's an easy add-on. We have other things that we can use as kind of standalones and that sort of thing. But we've had great success with iStents. I think one of the biggest myths was actually one that you just said, which is where, you think about it logically that only in mild disease. But actually, we have used this in kind of more advanced patients where you just got to get the lens out of their lenses. The problem, it's taken up too much space, and kind of you got to look at the underlying mechanism. Bobby hit the nail there, where there's so many patients that come and they haven't even been gonioed, so they're being mismanaged for God knows how long, and so that's kind of a key. We do use iStents. We also use Hydrus. I don't know how many of you guys, it may be a little bit less common, but we also have kind of Ike, of course, coined the term MIGS, all those years ago, but we're now using the term MIBS for microinvasive bleb surgery. So we have things like Zens, which I know you guys have, and we have the PreserFlow, which hopefully will be over there soon. And so I think gone are the days where you just kind of have to jump to a trab. It's heartbreaking when you saw those 45-year-old patient with a trab for mild disease, and it's just like, it's wild. Now you have these options. We talk about a stepwise approach, starting with MIGS, starting with laser, actually, forget, that, jumping up with the drops as you need to, and then going to your MIGs, your MIBs, and then eventually if you need filtering surgery. So I think it's a really exciting time in both glaucoma and refractive surgery. It has a different focus, refractive surgery being kind of more of an elective type of thing, whereas, glaucoma is still medical, but there are all these premium options that are available. And I think that's a really exciting thing for patients. There are lots of patients out there like Bobby who would do anything to get off their drops. So
yeah. I know even like drug delivery, right? Like in US, we have Durista, we have iDose. And I mean,
you can combine that with your MIGs, right? So,
right. Combining them or even considering it doing earlier. Like, there are a lot of people who forget to put their eye drops in. They're accidental follow sleepers. Let me just put the kids to sleep or the grandkids to sleep. Boom, you're out for the whole night. Absolutely. Not speaking from experience, but just throwing that out there.
No, 100%. So.
Hey guys, well, we're coming up on an hour. I just want to say thank you again for joining us and lending your expertise. I think this was an awesome conversation. Thanks everybody who attended. Thanks everybody who interacted with us. This is recorded. It will be posted on the website. If there's some tips or tricks that maybe you forgot to write down or want to take back. Obviously, interact with us via email. And everybody have a great night.
See ya. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks all.
Thanks.